Okay, so today we've got Intrepid Metals, and Mark is here as the CEO to lead the presentation. Mark, go ahead.
All right, terrific. Thanks everyone for joining. I am the chairman and CEO of the company. I'm the founder of the company. I put the flagship projects together about 5.5, 6 years ago. Have been leading the company as its main financier since that time, and the role of chairman, executive chairman, and I jumped in as CEO in September with a view to bringing in a strategic, which we did in December of last year when we brought in Teck. High level my involvement. I'm here today with Evelyn Cox, who's a geologist and also works with me on all of the corporate development activities, and Dan MacNeil, our technical consultant who's been with the project from day one and knows where every rock and twig is on the entire property. So he's the guy that's going to be leading the technical questions, and there's nobody better, quite frankly. Next slide. So we set this up to be a pure Arizona play. I have a long history in Arizona. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. The idea for the flagship project, which I'll discuss, was with me long before I created Intrepid because of information I had. We're looking for fast track potential, shallow, high grade copper, but obviously in the environment down in that part of the world where you find these CRDs. They're usually associated porphyries, if not always. Whether you find it or not, it's another question. And that's what we're looking for, because there's no better jurisdiction than Arizona for fast track permitting. And I would tell you the county we have that we're in is the best county in the state. So a great state and the best county in the state. So a little bit about the team there and their depth of experience. Lots of guys that have experience from major mining companies, Rio Tinto, Arizona Mining, Western Copper, etc. And our new strategic partner is Teck, that just came in for a 9.9 interest with plenty of ability under their investor rights to increase that position. 90 million shares outstanding, 35.6 million warrants, 19.4 at 45, 5.5 at 68, another 9.6 at 50. Most of that is Teck, some large shareholders that total 9.1, so large block shareholders, and management. The rest of it's fairly widely distributed. The stock is undervalued. Everybody says that. I know that. I'm going to tell you why. And I'm also going to tell you why we're at an inflection point now, and you want to buy the stock, because that's why everybody's here today. We have 3 projects. Corral Copper, which is the one I put together, which was the flagship property of the company, always intention to be there. Tombstone South, which is a big swing, go big or go home project to the what we call the Taylor Deeps or the South 32 analog. And then Mesa, which is pretty much just an address-driven story. But Corral is what Teck invested in, not at the project level in equity, but that was the driver for their investment. So we've talked about Arizona. Next slide. Okay, so this is a slide I'm going to spend some time on. The Johnson, if you look at the I-10, which runs out of Tucson, you can see lots of mining on this map, historical and present. You see where our 3 projects are located around historical mining. You'll see Johnson Camp, Excelsior Mining, right in the center by the I-10. In fact, it used to be nicknamed the I-10 project years ago. I was chairman there for 12 years, did all the initial financing until we brought in private equity. My job was to get it financed through permitting. Start to finish permitting in Cochise County for that project, federal and state, was 2.5 years start to finish. That was record time. It's because of what we don't have in this county, and it's the same for Corral. That's why I love this county. It is the most permittable environment you'll find. You have a sparsely populated area. Unlike other parts of Arizona, you don't have commercial agriculture of any meaningful size competing for the aquifer. The aquifer is where fights start. We've got a plentiful aquifer, and there's no commercial agriculture there. So you have sparsely populated, high unemployment rate, and a business community that I know very well from my time at Excelsior 12 years that is 100% in favor of mining development. You have no indigenous issues of any kind, no state and federal parks, no endangered species. It's essentially a bit of a moonscape out there. So it's really the ideal environment to get a permit quickly. Most of our land package is private land, so we don't need permits to drill on them. But even on the BLM land, we get the responses back lightning fast because they just know there's no issues in this area. So I love this area. You've got a generating station nearby with plenty of power capacity, high voltage power lines running through the region. You can see the dotted line there that you see on the map, the little dots. That's the railway, dual tracks all the way to the west coast. Plus, you've got two interstates you're looking at there, and a secondary road network onto the properties that doesn't require a 4x4. So you have all the benefits of being remote, but none of the burdens because everything's all around you. And so the idea when I set up Corral was to get rid of the problems that had prevented that area from being developed in the first place, and then set a dinner table for a major that says you couldn't have a more permittable environment. And now you've got enough evidence to carry this thing further with your deeper treasury. So unlike Excelsior and unlike Alderon and other projects I've been involved in, the course we charted was not to do PEAs, not to do resources, not to print them so that we can get coverage from banks, which doesn't do anything anyway, but to build a dinner setting for a major. They don't need any of those things to make their own assessments. They're plenty capable of doing it on their own. And that's what's happened. We brought in Teck. There's a price to be paid for that. And that price to be paid is you don't have any third-party data points to validate your project in the market. So you don't have a resource report. You don't have coverage because you can't get coverage without a resource report. You don't yet have your major partner. So there's a degree of uncertainty that overhangs you because you're missing all of those things. The good side of it is when you concentrate just on what we did, which was consolidating a land package and drilling the hell out of it in a permittable jurisdiction that's proven with what we did at Johnson Camp in the recent past, you've got yourself something that the majors are all interested in. So the Teck deal, which we'll talk about more detail later, is really the first third-party validation we've had. It came out over Christmas, so not a lot of eyeballs on it. And we're doing this presentation here in early January. So I still think that the market hasn't caught on to this and that now is the time to get in on this, what has been an underrated story for understandable reasons and has been validated by Teck's investment. Next slide. So the history at Corral was fragmented land ownership. All the majors knew about this ground. I knew they knew about it. I knew about it when I was at the other company, but it was pizza pie ownership. You had 7 or 8 different owners, and they were all fighting each other, suing each other, destroying each other's drill core. It was a real Hatfield and McCoy type of feuding going on down there. I had just permitted Gunnison, so I walked into these guys, and it took a year and a half with myself and Ken Brophy, and said, look, you guys have killed each other, fighting each other. Nobody wants to invest here because the land package hasn't been consolidated. Cast your lot in with me. We'll do some deals. The bigger ones, we give them equity and put them on the board. And let's all get under one roof, consolidate the land package, and go get a major into this project. And that's what we've done. But it was a lot of work to get there. And one of the things we had to do, because of drill core that had been destroyed, we had the logs. We had to go about and re-drill a lot of this stuff and prove that, in fact, what we thought was there and what the data from history said was there is there. And then we had to expand on it. And then we had to do additional work above and beyond that to demonstrate the porphyry potential. And so that's a lot of what Dan's going to talk about today. So now that we're getting to the drill results and the course that we followed and other technical information, I'm going to turn the slide over to Evelyn and Dan to speak to this.
Okay, I'll take it from here, Evelyn and Mark. That's the idea.
Yep.
So, as Mark sort of mentioned, this is a patch of ground that's very well known for those that work in the Southwest US, particularly in Arizona. It was a Herculean feat by Intrepid to consolidate this fragmented land position into one contiguous patch of ground. That sort of activity allowed the company to consider all of the indications of mineralization that appear across the previously fragmented land position as one or two or three systems. And I'll get into how those systems work in a little bit, but you can see by this land position map that we've got on this slide, people almost immediately took notice when Intrepid started to produce some long intercepts of very robust grade mineralization. Immediately, Ivanhoe Electric and Rio Tinto joined in and picked up the sort of available ground around the company. Now, I think a lot of people are tempted to ask, why didn't Intrepid carry out that activity in advance? And the simple answer is that Intrepid didn't need to. Intrepid has more than enough ground and has very adequately covered the mineralized systems that are present on it. So here we have a good example of a junior exploration company making ripples in an important copper and gold space in Arizona. Next slide. So, a key question later on might be, why was Teck interested? And I think for my part of the presentation, I'm going to really try to hammer home the notion of metal endowment. That is to say that there is an anomalous amount of copper and gold and silver, for that matter, across this property, so much so that a large company would stand up and take notice. The other thing is that Intrepid has a bunch of historically defined mineralized zones, 3 of them across a 3.5-kilometer northwest trending segment of the property. Those are considered carbonate replacement systems. They're locally very high grade, lots of copper, lots of gold, and some silver. So there is a really strong metal endowment. And what a lot of the exploration work that Intrepid has done to date has done or worked upon is to define a linkage between the carbonate replacement systems that we know about and the porphyry copper systems that they're linked to. Now, this isn't conceptual, and I'll show you some field evidence for this, but it's perfectly analogous to what happens at the Bisbee camp. And later in the deck, I'll show you how that linkage works and why Corral copper is a direct analog. But it's for this reason that a company like Teck gets interested, because they have the previously defined carbonate replacement mineralization, at surface sort of fleshed out. And now this newly emerging porphyry copper linkage, which has the real potential to dramatically increase mineralized volumes and create an opportunity for a company that owns and operates big yellow dump trucks. So next slide, please. So Intrepid, since 2024, has drilled over 10,000 meters, testing the Holiday, Earp, Ringo, and newly emerging Clanton zones. The sort of 2 years of extensive field work has allowed Intrepid to bring the Corral copper project into the modern exploration age. We reprocessed all of the geophysics, including airborne mag and ZTEM, that's an electrical method. Intrepid collected really compelling and new gravity data in which we saw a new zone called Target 3, about a kilometer east of Ringo, emerge, which was drilled. We collected LiDAR, did a satellite-based shortwave infrared alteration study, fugitive calcite vein mapping, surface mapping, sampling, and prospecting, and built the project's first ever 3-dimensional geological model, which was instrumental in planning and executing drill holes and allowed us to maintain a good flow of very positive drill results. Next slide, please. So this slide focuses in on the Ringo and Clanton zone. You can see all of the intercepts sort of spread on the map in the text here. I won't read them. But the big takeaway is that the mineralization that we see at Ringo Clanton contains some of the highest grades and longest intercepts. Moreover, what we see in these drill core is evidence of a transition from the carbonate replacement mineral deposit clan to the porphyry copper mineral deposit clan. I'll show you some field evidence in a subsequent slide, but this is high temperature alteration, including potassic alteration and porphyry B veins, both in the drill core itself, but also in breccia bodies. And these breccia bodies have come ripping through the crust and have picked up pieces of mineralized porphyry and brought them to the surface. And it's these porphyry indications that give us the confidence we need to test the property for porphyry copper deposits as a separate continuum to the CRD mineralization that we have at surface. And it's these observations that come from mapping and drill core logging that larger mining companies take very seriously, and that's what gives confidence to test targets across properties like this for the bigger porphyry prize. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that Corral copper is analogous to a system located about 45 kilometers south. This is called Bisbee, and Bisbee is located in exactly the same host rocks as we see at Corral copper. That is to say, there's Paleozoic carbonate rocks with porphyry intrusions in them. These porphyry intrusions are Jurassic, so the same age as the system that we see at Corral copper. But more importantly, we have a linked carbonate replacement deposit at Copper Queen. That's 53 million tons of 6% copper. And spatially and probably genetically associated with that is the Lavender porphyry, and that's 223 million tons of 0.6. This happens in other places on the planet where the same magmatic hydrothermal systems that form porphyries bleed into the surrounding limestones and produce these locally high-grade carbonate replacement systems. So we have all of the same rocks and lots of evidence of all the same processes happening at Corral copper, which makes the sort of upside exploration potential very, very good at Corral copper. Next slide, please. So I mentioned there is confirmed evidence for the presence of previously unrecognized porphyry systems at Corral copper. What we see is porphyry style alteration, and there's a good example of what we call phyllic alteration on the left side of this slide. I mentioned there's breccia clasts with porphyry mineralized veins in them. That's that center slide. Very little question that that is the porphyry regime that we're looking at in these rock photographs. Finally, we've got a vein stockwork. So this is a sulfide vein stockwork. In fact, it's cross-cutting. A beautiful example of fluid flow in the porphyry regime associated or directly found on the Corral copper property. Next slide, please. This was a really important bunch of observations for the company to put together for the project because it gave us the confidence and the evidence to really work hard to try to identify places on the property that have porphyry potential. When you look at the geophysics, you put together the surface mapping, the distribution of higher temperature alteration, you come up with a plethora of targets that need drill testing. This is another reason why a company like Teck is interested in this, because it's a very metal endowed, target rich environment. Note the scale on this slide. That's a 1 kilometer scale bar. What you're looking at here is Z-Tem resistivity. These are not small features. They're very large, and large features coupled with large alteration zones and big mineralized footprints at surface have the potential to yield big deposits. And that's why major mining companies stand up and take note when they see these sorts of things on exploration properties. The next slide, please. So we put this long section in through all of the zones. Note that Holiday in the north is on the left-hand side, all the way down to Clanton on the right-hand side, which is in the south. I mentioned that you sort of need big features to find big deposits. Well, you're looking at the largest Z-Tem feature on the property, located in a very metal-endowed copper, gold, and silver patch of the property, for which we had not drilled in any significant depth. So we see large geophysical features that match the widespread geological features that suggest there's potential for mineralization. These sorts of things have to be drilled, and of course they have excellent potential for high volumes of mineralization. Next slide, please. So this slide just sort of drives home a few points that I've made already. You can see on the very far right-hand side of this diagram, we've juxtaposed the Abrigo Formation limestones at Bisbee with what we see at Corral copper, and they're indistinguishable by eye. And that's because They are the same rocks, and they've undergone a very similar geological history. And that's sort of what underpins the potential. In geological terms, we call these reactive host rocks. And when porphyry fluids responsible for porphyry copper deposits hit these things, you tend to get dizzyingly high grades. And foundationally favorable host rocks with all the other features I mentioned indicate upside exploration potential, and that's why we're here. Next slide, please. Okay, I think, Mark, do you want me to turn this back over to you at this point, or do you want me to keep?
No, keep going with Tombstone South. I think it'll be a good opportunity to explain what this project is to us. It is our highest risk, but possibly greatest return project in the mix. It is go deep and go big, or, it's probably either a home run, but there are no base hits. So why don't you give the context with respect to the analog that we're chasing and why this project should be drilled despite the cost and risk associated with it?
Sure. Okay, so Mark mentioned previously that Tombstone South is a Taylor analog. I'll get into why we think that is, but similar to Corral copper, we've got these Paleozoic limestones that are wonderfully reactive in the sort of magmatic hydrothermal spectrum that porphyry deposits live in. What I'm going to show you here is a sort of very no-brainer, although deep exploration target that really deserves a drill hole. It's fully permitted and ready to go. So yeah, well, why don't we go to the next slide? So I kind of touched on this slide a little bit already, but we've got the sort of reactive favorable host rocks, similar that you see to Taylor. We have documented or known porphyry systems in and adjacent to this area, and that's the important fluid source that we need to really drive a high-grade carbonate replacement or CRD deposit. Furthermore, we've got in some historical drilling on the property confirmation that carbonate replacement style mineralization exists quite high or quite near surface on the property. As you know, these sorts of mineral deposits they're tough to detect because they don't bleed very far into the host rock, so they can be tough to find. In the next slide, I'll explain why we think one is hidden here and needs a drill hole. Next slide, please. So you can see in the sort of schematic cross-section that we're showing here, we've got the Cretaceous Bisbee Formation and some limestone laminations in that whole TS1 cut bona fide replacement style mineralization. And spatially associated with this, we have the Robbers Roost porphyry system separated by a fault. So what we've got here is sort of a bunch of reactive rocks in the right geological setting. Next slide. We put in a line of IP geophysics and got a very interesting feature in rocks that have no business being chargeable. So what this is sort of direct detection of sulfides in exactly the geological environment that we're interested in. That warrants a drill hole because, as I mentioned, these things have potential for dizzyingly high grades, and that's why the technical team at Corral is bullish on drilling this hole. Next slide, please. So finally, the Mesa Well project. The two projects I've mentioned previously are a little bit older than the main cluster of deposits shown on this map. We're in the Laramide here, or the Cretaceous. The Mesa Well project is a patch of ground that has a large porphyry alteration footprint with sniffs of copper mineralization here and there. The idea is to really sort of follow our technical team's noses to vector toward the porphyry prize, which of course in the Laramide in Arizona can be very, very large, as you can see by the plethora of deposits we put on the map here. Next slide, please. So what we have at Mesa Wells, again, is this large porphyry alteration footprint and a sort of critical mass of previous drilling that provides a vector to the northwest to keep drilling for higher temperature alteration, which ultimately would, if the company is successful, come together with a porphyry copper discovery at Mesa Wells. It's a sort of a great part of the world to work in with prolific copper endowment. Okay, Mark, I'll turn it back over to you here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well done. So Our work this year is going to be governed by the decisions we make on the Joint Technical Committee we have with Teck. I expect, based on, I've always been very open. If anyone sees any of the videos I've done since coming back as CEO in September, I've been focused entirely on corporate transactions. I think there's probably a perception in the market that, okay, we have our strategic now and that file's closed. It's not closed. It's a very robust project. It continues. I can tell you that a number of larger companies have expressed an interest in getting involved now that Teck is in, rather than saying it's over. At 9.9, it's not over. And I would expect the next drivers of our story to be more corporate driven rather than by the drill bit, which has driven everything up until now. The drill bit will be more of an H2 once Teck completes its initial work for targeting the porphyry, and then the drill bit will be directed toward porphyry targets. In the meantime, we finally have that validation. Nobody believes that a 9.9 crowds them out of the space, and so we've got to actually have a more competitive environment for further strategic investment, be they mining companies or large mining funds, than we had prior. Because again, we didn't even have a technical report on the record. So that's really all I should say here. I'd like to open the floor to the questions.
Excellent. Who would like to go first? Lawrence, go ahead, please.
Great presentation, guys. Clearly, you've got a lot of potential there. Huge project, lots of mineralization, and appreciate putting the complete set of drill results on the website. I'm trying to get my mind around the results that you've got there. You're publishing long intervals of mineralization that look porphyry-like, but they seem to be made up more of discrete high-grade hits. I wonder, Dan, if you can talk to that a little bit, or are you seeing, CRD type mantos, or is it skarn, or is it actually a porphyry style that you've been drilling through so far?
That's a good question, Lawrence. So the honest answer is we have aspects of all of those systems. Most notably at Ringo, we have end-member carbonate replacement massive sulfide lenses. And then we have local transitions to skarn bodies. And then we have locally the copper belt. We have local transitions to complete potassic alteration with sporadic porphyry B veins. So there's a sort of a superposition there of those styles depending on where you get. And maybe if I back up a little bit, it'll make a little bit more sense. The geometry of Ringo is sort of a raft of Abrigo and also Martin and Escabrosa Paleozoic limestones that have been replaced to varying degrees. Some of that replacement is massive sulfide, obvious carbonate replacement style mineralization. And some of that is a little higher temperature and falls within the skarn realm. And then parts of it, again, if you get into the sort of outside of that raft, into the copper bell porphyry, which is a Jurassic porphyry, you start to see indications of higher temperature alteration, including this potassic alteration with B veins, porphyry B veins, and in some cases, porphyry D veins. So we interpret those observations together to reflect that there is a sort of transition from distal carbonate replacement mineralization, where you have those reactive limestones, to a more typical porphyry environment. Does that answer your question, Lawrence?
Yeah, that's great. So you've got a mix. You're in a transitional zone, and it's pretty clear why Teck has taken such a strong interest in this.
Yeah, absolutely. The other wrinkle that bears mentioning is that part of the work that Intrepid did identified a suite of breccia bodies that occur almost all over the property. These somewhat late with respect to mineralization. These things have entrained class of bona fide free copper mineralization. So we know that elsewhere in the system, these breccia bodies have sampled what we would call a porphyry senso stricto, which is quite interesting and does help to underpin that interpretation that we will have a bona fide transition to a larger porphyry body at some point.
Okay, thanks, Lawrence. Byron, you're up.
I'm up. Thank you. I remember visiting Excelsior Copper a couple of years ago. And in fact, I was going through a bunch of rocks in my basement not long ago, and I found my samples that I picked up along the way. As far as what we're talking about today, I mean, you instantly have my attention when you're talking about Bisbee and Tombstone. One of my first site visits as a real geologist was visiting Bisbee in 1978. Some of the best specimens in my collection right over there are Bisbee copper. They're gorgeous. When you say copper queen in the same breath as what you're doing, you're setting a high bar. Not that you're not going to get there. I'm just saying that you're setting a high bar, so because, Bisbee is Bisbee. And so what I'm really curious on, and maybe you said it, but I didn't put, okay, this is January 13th of 2026. I mean, what are you going to do to kind of build yourself a geologic model that you can, show to the newsletter writers and the geologists of the world who want to, get a better feel for, why you're the next copper queen, if you get the question.
I do. Yeah, and I think I can answer that for you. So I sort of touched on the geological setting, first of all. What we have is a bunch of Jurassic intrusions. Locally, we have porphyry, bona fide porphyry textures in those intrusions.
Mhm.
And then we have the Cambrian Abrigo formation, as well as the Paleozoic Martin and Escabrosa limestone. So that sort of geological architecture, if you like, is exactly what forms Bisbee.
Mhm.
Now, what's sort of critical to note is that Corral copper, historic exploration addressed a bunch of fragmented land, but focused entirely on this high-grade replacement style portion. So they were looking for things that were sticking out of the ground and not thinking about that broader architecture. Now, today we know that the Lavender Pit, the Lavender Porphyry, and the Copper Queen are spatially and genetically linked. I think this is one of the first opportunities that someone has put all of the magmatic centers together and can look at them in that context at the property scale. So I think that gives Intrepid the unique opportunity to look at this from a mineral systems approach rather than finding mineralization at surface and stepping beside it and drilling more holes. The other thing we have to dovetail with that is we've inverted and reprocessed all of the mag, giving us unique 3D insights for the property. And we've collected all of the surface alterations, so we know where the hotspots are. And we've done mineral systems wide. So from Holiday to Clanton, we've done very detailed geological mapping. So we know where the vein clusters are. We know where the damage zones are. We know what is replacement versus porphyry altered intrusions or dikes and sills. This all gets fed into our 3D model and allows us to see the project in a brand new way. And that's, I think, the sort of game changer. And, Mark mentioned previously in the discussion that the company's at an inflection. And it's this understanding that's going to feed directly into that statement.
Yeah, I'd add one thing that in just my experience in many other projects, a lot of these old, really high grade deposits, the Homestake mine, for example, in South Dakota, but Bisbee as well, they were so busy just mining the really high grade stuff, the easy to see stuff, chasing the veins, literally taking money to the bank. They were so busy doing that. They never really did any serious larger scale geology. They did a terrible job of exploring it. And as you say, putting an entire system together. So I think one of your selling points here has to be that we're taking all these little onesies and twosies from the past and we're putting together in a systemic way. It's very intriguing. I mean, when you talk about the similarities of the rocks and geochemistry, what's going on. I mean, and like you said, when you mention the word Copper Queen, you're setting a high bar. But I mean, I've been there. I love that area and I'm intrigued. Tell me more, as the man says. Okay.
Byron, you raised an important point. When we first got involved in the project, we were talking about budgets and what the project needed. And the technical team put together a proposal that said we need to bring Corral copper into the modern age of exploration. We need the foundational data sets because sooner or later, looking at this thing at the property scale is going to be important. And credit to Mark and Evelyn and the management team of the time, they cut the checks to get all that done. And I think you're seeing that exercise bear fruits today.
One thing I think Byron asked was, what's the plan for the next 6 months to more prove out this, or the next stage with the modeling that you plan to do?
So basically, I think the next step forward is to sort of double down on geophysics, including IP, revisiting our existing interpretations and matching them with the plethora of drill core and surface data that we have. What we really need to do is to increase confidence in a lot of the porphyry targets we have, and more and new geophysics, so IP and gravity, will help round that out and get us to the point in where we're confident enough to get more drill steel into this stuff. All that, of course, will be done in a 3D environment using Leapfrog, which has guided the drilling to date.
Okay. Gary?
Thank you for the presentation. I've got a couple of questions here. What are the biggest hurdles yet for Intrepid, whether that be local, regulatory, drilling, et cetera? What are the biggest hurdles? Where are the potential failure points, and what are you doing to mitigate them? And finally, how invested in the company are the upper levels of management aside from awarded shares?
Okay. Dan can speak to some of this too. There's no local issues. If you put my time together, I've been in Cochise County now for 17 years, and I've already permitted one mine. There are no local issues. That was part of the dinner table setting. So we don't have problems there. And most of the land package we have is private land. So when we're going to go do something, we tell them we're going to go do it. We don't ask their permission. And because of the history of the region, the BLM responds almost like an automaton with respect to any request that we have to make. It is the easiest area I've ever worked in my life, and I've worked all over the place. So there are no local issues or state issues for us in this county. I do believe it's the best county in one of the best states for mining in the country. The risks aren't there. There's no permitting risk or drilling risk or aquifer risk or anything associated in that way. The biggest risk we have, and why we always wanted to bring in a major, is the risk to the Treasury trying to properly target the porphyry and hit it without blowing our brains out. And that's the biggest risk. So what did Intrepid do to mitigate that risk? It brought in a major mining company who wanted to take that risk on with deep pockets. Their investment is a pathway investment, meaning the initial investment of 9.9, but a pathway to larger percentages. And so that's how we mitigated that risk. We know there's a porphyry there. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Some of the rocks that Dan showed you in that slide with the 3 different kinds of rocks, they simply can't be moved that far. They're from the guts of the system. They can't travel that far. So you're looking hundreds of meters at the most, and less than 500 is what I've been advised. So our risk is finding the porphyry. There's been no prior work done to properly target it. Certainly provide evidence of it, but to properly target it and go after it, we needed to bring in a major partner. So that's what we've done. I've answered part of your questions there. Can you remind me what I haven't answered?
The other part of the question was how invested in the company at upper levels with, aside from awarded shares?
Okay, I don't have any awarded shares. I've been the founder, and I have invested in every round of financing from day one and never sold a share. I don't know how much more invested you can get in that. I've been paying higher and higher prices all along. I haven't skipped around. And so I'm really the guy in that regard. All of the other people that came in after me, whom I hired, have a mix of investment and rewarded shares, right? You have to incentivize people to join the company. So that's just part of the compensation package you have to offer. When I built this company, I had a history of big benches and expensive people and the burn rates associated with them. When I started this company, it was exactly the opposite. Small bench, but contract out the expertise and use sort of the guaranteed flow of income to basically monopolize certain contractors' times so that they essentially end up becoming part of your team. Certainly that's what we try to do with Dan, and we've been successful in that.
Nice job.
Yeah, that we have. And so we incentivize them and we give them all our work, and in return we get the benefit, but we don't have, a big bench in terms of overhead. So in other words, when people aren't working for us, we're not paying. So really, this is my deal, and I have carried myself through the deal as you would want to see, which is someone who's constantly putting in every round. And I think I've probably written $1 million in checks at this point.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Okay, great.
Thanks, guys, for the presentation. I have two questions. So my first would be, I think you said that the market hasn't fully internalized the tech investment yet because it came together over the Christmas. So I was just thinking for those listening and trying to understand the story, what do you think investors are still misunderstanding today? And also for my second one, and you've kind of mentioned parts of this already, but just to crystallize it for listeners, if we fast forward 12 to say 18 months, what does success look like for Corral Copper?
All right. No promotion has been done at all in the company historically. So that's a big point for you guys. And that's uncharacteristic. Anyone who knows me like Lawrence from way back knows that's exactly the opposite of how I carried the business. So we've done almost no promotion at all. We've made no effort to do that. This is really the kickoff, this event here, for promoting, because now we have that third-party validation. It's an underreported story. And, it's something I've taken heat for. Usually in my past, I've taken heat for being overly promotional. On this deal, I've been taking heat for not being promotional. But I didn't want to spend money on promoting when investors didn't have that third-party validation, especially in the absence of a technical report or analyst coverage. So it's an overlooked story because it's been woefully under-promoted. So now a bigger part of the budget is now going to go to getting the story out with the tech investment. The driver is going to be two things. Number one, as I've told you, and I've been honest up front with everybody, ever since Rio staked around us and Ivanhoe staked around us, we're busy as shit dealing with big companies. It has stretched our bandwidth and caused people to work very long hours to try and keep up with it. And the nature of the tech investment is such that it has not scared anyone off. In fact, in most cases, it's made it more attractive. So you have two drivers coming up. Number one, further activity on the corporate side, which I fully expect and is what I spend my time doing. I'm not a geologist, I'm a deal maker. And then the next thing will be the deliberate targeting of the porphyry in a program designed primarily by Teck and their bench, who have spent, you can imagine the due diligence process is very rigorous. So my expectation is that in hindsight, by June, people will look back at this time period, which is basically December the 22nd through to the end of June, as that point where you kind of went from zero to hero. Certainly, we're going to be spending a lot of money getting the message out now, because if we have to raise money in the future, with everything we have, we don't plan on doing it at these prices. And we don't need to raise any money this year, I don't think. With the warrants, we expect to come in as well. I didn't talk about that, but we want to see those warrants get taken down. And the best way to do that is to get the story out and create liquidity in the stock. So this presentation is our first material promotional event that we've ever done, in my opinion, other than sort of standard interviews off the back of press releases. We just haven't spent any money, but now we are. So I think it is a good opportunity to buy for that reason. There's a lot more stake on the table than sizzle. We're going to be adding the sizzle, and I expect the market uptake to be very good.
That's great. Please go ahead.
Hey guys, Mark, why haven't you promoted this one so far?
Because when you go out and you promote a story that sounds exciting, and there's nothing for people like you to latch on to from a validation standpoint. Do you have a big major shareholder? Do you have a technical report that some analyst has covered? Do you have anything? And the answer was no. So when you have investors have a choice to make, Some of them choose to do it off the back of drill results, but everybody's looking for somebody else to do the due diligence. Everybody's looking for somebody else to validate the project. So until we had that, we made a decision simply not to spend a lot of money on promotion because we felt that we would be deselecting our potential investors because they went to look for that validation. It wasn't there. Everything changed with the Teck deal. Everything. And we believed that deal was coming, which is why we booked this session. Good that it came true, but there's more coming. And as such, we can now take a good chunk of cash and use it to get the story out.
And yet you were able to raise quite a bit of money at first for a story that didn't have any,
No, that's me. That's just that's my book. That's all. I've made people money in the past. Not everything has worked out great, but a lot of them, a lot of the people that first invested in this deal, I had a history with, and I invested it at a quarter in a new deal and got out at 250 on an NYSE listing. So, those are the people I go back to when I need to start something new. I've raised all the money in this company. Every deal's been non-brokered.
The warrants were extended to April this year or next year?
April of this year.
This year. So in light of that, and in light of the fact that you're not going to be drilling until the second half, I guess you don't want to say too much on what corporate developments you're going to make, but obviously you want the warrants exercised. So what do you think is going to push the stock up sustainably enough?
First of all, you come to an event like this, hopefully we've done a good enough job to show you that this is worth showing to your followings or personal investment. And once that starts, we all know this is a momentum-driven business. Selling begets selling and buying begets buying. So there's that. But there's also high confidence on another significant corporate development. That's really all I can say.
Okay. And just a quick question on why did Ken leave?
Ken is a big company guy who was getting beaten up in his first experience dealing with the capital markets in a junior mining company. At the end of the day, he's still with us as an advisor, and in fact, we use him. But not everybody's well suited for that side. You got to be a bit of a street fighter. It's not easy. So it's not for everybody. It's definitely not for the button ground crowd. So I think for him, that was difficult. And at that point, I decided to step back in to the CEO role after being out of it for 4 years and do what needed to be done, which was to make a deal with a major so that we had that third-party validation and that our capital markets issues would diminish as a result of that once we got word out. That's really all there is to it.
What going forward is Teck going to be leading or advising on the drill plan?
The next drill plan will be shaped by them primarily. But they have some preliminary work to do first for best target the porphyries. But that's, they have the right to increase their ownership. Their technical committee oversees everything and it will dominate. That's what they're here to do, is target the porphyry and drill it.
Cool. Just one more question. On the drilling at Corral, before you've drilled about 46 holes, I guess, right? Before that, has it been drilled very much? I think there was a couple of drills.
Yeah, for sure. These guys were feuding. There's no joke. They were destroying each other's core, mowing it down. I can actually take you to a place on the property where there's the remnants of a mowed down core shed because these guys were fighting so much. So yeah, it's been drilled before, but no core. So guess what? You got to go out and re-drill some of it. So that's what we did.
Thanks.
Okay, Nick, go ahead.
Guys, thanks for the presentation. Most of my questions have been answered already, but I am sorry if I missed it. How much cash do you guys have now, and how long do you anticipate that'll last? One thing too, with regard to the warrants too, I think your share price is sitting around 50 cents Canadian, and the lowest strike price on the warrant I see is 45 cents. Suppose the share price goes down, the warrants don't get exercised, and you need to raise funds. When do you suppose you'd need to do that?
Okay, well, so the upside of that is the warrant overhang at 45 cents is gone. So that will make things easier.
And there was a lot at that number, right? That was the bulk of them.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no question. There's 18 million of them. So it's been an albatross, 19.4, excuse me. So they'll be off the books, and then you're dealing with a relatively smaller number at 50 and a smaller number yet again at 68. So elimination of warrant overhang isn't the worst thing that can happen. But my goal over these next 3 months is to bag another corporate development and finally spend some money getting this story out such that we see those warrants get taken down. And I have to tell you, last Friday and today and yesterday, warrant exercises are trickling in. I don't think people are taking the nickel, but I think they're positioning themselves to be nimble as the stock price goes up. So
Gotcha.
it's around 9.
That's US.
No, it's everything Canadian.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Nick. Byron, you want to go again? We'll wrap up with Doug.
Yes, thank you. We've been talking about Corral. I want to hear just a little bit more about what you're going to do with Tombstone. And the reason I say this is because between Corral and Tombstone, you have two of the most tellable mining stories in all of newsletterdom. You know, the Ed Schifflin, Tombstone, silver discovery. The only stone you'll find any value is your Tombstone, which is why he named it after, you know, and then 40 million ounces later, you know, I hold in my hand 1882 New Orleans mint silver dollars that were minted out of Tombstone silver. I mean, for 10 years, there was a direct line between Tombstone and the New Orleans mint to supply silver to the US government. It's a very, very tellable story if you got something to tell. And the same thing with Corral and Bisbee. I mean, man, you can tell that story left, right, up, and down. When you say you've been holding back on marketing, okay, great. You need to, I guess what I'm saying is you got to put some rocks on the table so that people like me can sort of take a picture of them and say, yeah, this is what you got. So, but what's going on with Tombstone real quick?
So we have the drill permits. Okay. So everything's been about Corral. We've extended the life of the option agreement because we believe it was a good use of money. The costs weren't inordinate. We have the drill permits. What we don't have is the money allocated to drill it. That's going to change one way or the other within the next 90 days. And I expect these warrants to get taken down. Again, I've said, yes, it looks like the stock isn't moving anywhere, but that's what it looks like before it moves somewhere. So if everybody wants to wait for it to move, then the next thing I hear from people is I missed it. So now is the time to get in for the reasons I told you. Not a dime has been spent on promotion. That's all changing. And this is a good story to get out. And the warrant advises the built-in financing to drill Tombstone. And as we've shown repeatedly in the past, even if you weren't tuned in, our time frame from getting money in the treasury to having drills turning is like 3 weeks. So I expect to drill Tombstone H1 this year.
Okay, that's great. Doug, go ahead, please.
Okay, a lot of the questions that I had, of course, have been answered. But let me see. Let me kind of sum this up in my own mind, and perhaps for the benefit of the listeners out there in TV land. Teck invested for roughly 10% of the company at roughly a 40 million Canadian market cap. And that's a small market cap, especially for the kind of story and assets that you have. So I think they got a pretty good deal, and it's attractive at low numbers like this. What kind of stock volume do you typically have? I didn't see that. When
Well, it's hundreds of thousands of shares a day. There have been days in the millions.
Okay.
But it tends to be sub 1 million and mostly 300,000 to 500,000.
And who do you think most of the buyers and sellers are at this point?
I talk to them all and they report their holdings to me. It's mostly retail. A lot of the selling, I know where it came from. Because we didn't have that due diligence validation point, we had to avail ourselves. We needed money to drill to get a major in. We were relying on the drill bit. We had to do these life financings and stuff like that. There's been an overhang in the market associated with those financings because they were essentially giant warrant clips.
Okay.
And that has hurt us. And I'm not the first guy you've heard complain about that. So, but by our calculations, we're at the tail end of that. And, we've worked through it the tough way. And I think we have getting this story out there, finally spending some money to get the story out. And the nature of the story is you've pointed out is going to mean there's very little resistance to the upside.
So how much cash is in the bank right now, Mark?
9 million.
About 9 million.
Very low burn right now because nobody's
What is-
doing anything.
What is the burn rate?
It's going to be about 100 and change a month when nobody's doing anything, which is right now.
But then when you start drilling, what does a meter of drilling cost there, incidentally?
It's about $400 a meter. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, you're in the right ballpark. We budget with 400. The actual costs are a little bit less than that, 375 to 390.
All in.
Okay.
All
So
in.
before you get into ore body, wherever it may be, how much overburden do you have on this? And how will this be mined, assuming that it is mined?
It's a Bisbee. There's no overburden. There's a
It's
lot
from
of
the it's from the surface.
So that's the CRD, right? So what is Bisbee? Bisbee is mining the CRDs and making money and then mining the porphyry. Well, you got to spend some money to define the porphyry. So that is the attractiveness, right? Dan, you want to add in on that?
I think that's really it. You kind of got it. The details of the geological architecture here are such that up and down are no longer up and down. They can be right and left. So, most people, when they say, oh, we want to drill deep for a porphyry, you think you have to drill a long hole. For us, it's really about finding which way paleo deep, which way was deep in the Jurassic. So the property has no real cover to speak of. You can stand on mineralization at Ringo if you want to. So I think what we're really going to have to think carefully about is under which carbonate units do we look, or adjacent to which carbonate units do we look. I don't think it's the typical depth question that you get with a lot of exploration projects. It's really about gaining confidence in the geophysical targets in the context of the geology that's exposed at surface.
The whole thing is going to be an open pit type of mine, correct? It's not going to be an underground mine, is it, at any point, or not?
Well, until we sort of establish where and volume, you can't really say for sure, but I would expect a lot. I would be thinking open pit long before I would be thinking underground, despite locally very high grade features at Ringo. So it's not off the table, but we don't talk much about underground mining when we're planning.
Okay. And what do you think you're looking at how many drill holes do you have right now?
In total, I think there is,
Drilled
we
46.
drilled 10.
46 holes.
And how many of them hit value as opposed turned out to be condemnation holes, as it were?
Oh, I
Every
would say
single one.
all of them.
Every single one.
Okay, and the value you hit was typically about 1% copper equivalent. That's what it kind of seemed like to me.
No, it's probably not that high. Maybe approximately half of that
Okay.
on an equivalency basis.
There's a lot of pockets of that. But I mean, if you want to spread it out over the whole thing, you get a lower number.
So as you guys wave your arms, and of course, we don't know how much more drilling how much more drilling do you think is going to have to be done in order to start moving towards a real assessment? Or
it really depends because you're hunting for a porphyry. Like the CRDs will be mined from surface. They'll be open pits. Like there's no question about that. But the majors are in for the porphyry. And I believe, based on all the evidence, that when all our dialogue with the majors, nobody's talking underground. I've never even heard it.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, the big Bisbee pit is the analogy. The mine the CRDs, then hit the porphyry. You're generating some cash while you're mining those CRDs. But how much you have to spend, I don't know. And that's why somebody earlier asked me, what was the biggest risk and how did you mitigate it? The biggest risk is hunting for a porphyry in a junior mining treasury. So that's why we brought in Teck, so that we could reduce that risk, because they're going to be better at targeting it. But I can't tell you how much money they can spend to identify the porphyry, Doug.
so the 10 million you got right now, drilling as you'd like, how long is that going to last you before you have?
I mean, it's their money that's ring fenced. So you're looking basically at 4 million getting spent before we touch the rest of it. And I'm not touching the rest of it right now. I'm not. Why? Because I've got other corporate things I'm working on, and I've got the promotion that I'm doing to get the story out finally. And I want to get this situation with the warrants straightened out. So, we're not going to be going back to market anytime soon looking for more money to drill. I would expect that to be a long way off, honestly, if those warrants get taken down. And if they don't, we'll have more latitude to raise money at higher prices with the overhang gone. I fully expect them all to get taken down, every single one.
So if magic happens and it turns out that you have another copper queen on your hands, what would that be worth? Would that particular deposit be worth today if it was a virgin deposit?
I didn't prepare for an answer for that question. And the number's really big.
It would be a very big number in line with some of the biggest purchases that happen. I mean, a 250 million ton porphyry and a 50 million ton 5% CRD. I mean, you think of a number that's really big, and that's what it's going to be in our space.
Life changing.
Yeah. Okay, so we're shooting for the billions, and then you've got these couple other deposits or potential deposits.
That's the order of magnitude that success could look like at this project.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's exciting stuff. I guess that sums it up. But listen, I agree. Looking at these things, I mean, this is a really good shop. This is like an ideal small mining company where you can make a lot of money. And maybe the risk isn't all that much, not at these prices. It's a pretty good story.
There's always risk on the investment side if you're taking a longer term view because you don't know all the things that are going to happen. But as a trade, because I know here this is all about the money, like it's the biggest layup you're going to come across as a trade. And if you've got some staying power and holding, you're not going to have to wait long to make money. That's for sure. But I think the investment is also attractive, and I'm about as long as it gets.
Okay, Ed,
Yeah.
it looks like you had one more question if you want to ask it before we wrap up.
Yeah, sorry, just one more question. On the carbonate replacement target at Corral, so it's 46 drill holes that you've done. Is that enough to put together any kind of resource estimate or no?
Yeah, I mean, you could, and cap your stock. And so that's why we didn't do it. We weren't out to define a resource. We were out to define the broad strokes in terms of outlining the potential size. We could put together a resource, but putting out a small resource or even a medium-sized one with a large inferred component, that we decided in the beginning not to play that game. That's not the game we were playing.
I see. Go ahead.
Yeah, the other wrinkle to that question is that specifically talking about the CRD, this may not have bled through in the presentation, but we have a ton of other targets that are near or at surface CRDs to put holes into.
Yeah.
We thought it'd be a fairly large compromise to cap it now when we have a bunch of dripping roast style CRD things sticking out of the ground to put holes in yet. So
Yeah.
we can make this bigger before we walk down that road, if Mark chooses to walk down that road. Maybe.
I mean, you make a really interesting point. We've left a ton on the table that we haven't drilled that's layup type material for expanding a resource. Our goal was to attract a strategic, and the chorus from all of them is like, okay, we get it. You guys really shouldn't be drilling anymore. We don't need to drill more to make our point to them. We're busy on that file, and we have been busy. If our goal was to make a bigger public resource, and we would drill another 40 holes, 20 of them with those juicy targets, and put it out. But that's not been our goal. Our goal is to establish enough evidence to make a major mining company decide this could be big and we need to get it. That was always the goal.
And one more question. How exciting is the new Clanton target there?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly exciting. People always wonder where the continuation of these things are or where the next zones are going to come from. And it didn't take much of a grunt to get into this one. So, we've got a couple of new instances of new mineralization that we're super bullish on chasing down. And this is why we hound Mark and Evelyn for more drill dollars, because it's there for the taking. So very excited, I guess, is your short answer, Ed.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Mark, Evelyn, Dan, that was a great presentation. I really appreciate it. Thanks very much for doing this and making us one of the first that gets to tell the story. So I
The
appreciate it.
first, not one of the first, the first.
The first. All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for
Okay,
listening.
you guys. Okay. I think it's just us now, guys. What do you think?
Well, like I said, I'm pretty happy with the story. I didn't even get to ask them my favorite question, which is, other than the obvious things, what really worries you? Because this is pretty, it seems to me to be pretty straightforward what they're trying to do and what they're looking for. So I don't know, are there any skeletons that seem like they could be buried, or big things that could go wrong, or other than getting blank drill holes, the company's got a good shot.
Doug, I kind of asked him that. I asked him what his biggest hurdles and failure points were.
Yeah, you did.
And he addressed it. One thing I liked about him, he was invested fully all the way through, but he also, even though he has a little bit of an attitude, he is a fighter. And this guy just feels like he's ready to get after it and fight. And I like that. I like that he's willing to fight, because it tells me that when he does face a hurdle or a failure point, he's going to try to figure out how to go through it, above it, around it, whatever. He's not going to tuck tail. So
I've known Mark for a very long time, and I agree totally. You know, he's going to make this a success one way or another. Well, like any exploration story, there's risks and, you know, blank holes and all the rest of it. But they have so many targets. It's such a rich geological environment, such widespread mineralization, that it's hard to imagine that they're not going to find something meaningful on at least one of those targets that will add value for this project.
This is a closeology play, in the sense that, hi, this is Tombstone South, right next to Tombstone. It's like, okay, you got my attention. Hi, this is Corral, and it looks a heck of a lot like the Copper Queen in Bisbee. Okay, you got my attention. If that's all they said without the drill holes and everything else, I'd think, yeah, whatever. But like he said, his focus wasn't to, you know, be flashy and, you know, impress the newsletter writers. His goal was to bring in a major, and he's got Teck, which, okay, clearly Teck sees something there. They wrote a check. And I think the downside is minimal, and the upside is blue sky. If it's not Copper Queen, if it's just half or a third or 1/5 of Copper Queen, it's still a great project, you know. And if it's not Tombstone, if it's just a third of Tombstone, it's great.
Yeah, I would expect more hand waving, honestly. Seemed like it was kind of understated for the potential here. That's just my opinion. I don't know.
That's right. There's not a lot of hand waving. That's right.
You had to encourage hand waving, Doug, to get any kind out of him.
I love hand waving. That's what this business is all about. But he's understated, and that's good. I think he's a serious guy.
The fighter metaphor sounds good. That seems quite relevant.
Well, I watched Mark with Excelsior and the Johnson Tract, and they did a very nice job of putting that all together. You know, the problem was it was in the doldrums of the mining, you know, bathtub in the 2000 and whatever, 16, 17, 18, copper prices sucked, you know, everything was tough, couldn't raise money, etc. Now you're in a whole different atmosphere of the market. Arizona begins as copper country. And then if you're in the same rocks as Bisbee, this is great. And the fact that Ivanhoe Electric came in and they're trying to play closeology as well with those guys. I think this is a tellable story, even without the rocks on the table, which is always fun to see. Show me some malachite and show me some tetrahedrite or something. It's always nice to see that stuff. But, you know, well, we got geophysics and we've done a lot of geology and we're putting together the whole mineral system. Well, okay, that's a whole different way to approach it, but a very tellable story. It's interesting that so much of their shareholding is retail. I didn't ask that question. How is it that, what was the evolution of the buying history that put, like, whatever that number was, you know,
especially since he hasn't
retail.
Since he hasn't raised any money, I don't think, through brokerage firms.
What's that strategy they use with he described it. It's something unique to Canada. I can't remember this type of financing.
Life, yeah.
Flow throughs, you mean?
Yeah. It's just financing without a prospectus.
That's all it is? All
I
right.
think so.
Well, there's the life, which is basically a mini prospectus and provides free trading shares without the hold period.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so in my view, this looks like, in the very least, a near-term promotion and a great stock play coming out of that. Very good chance of exploration success, which could add very substantial value.
I mean,
Sorry, Byron, please.
they're basically turning over the drilling program to Teck in the next 24 months. Okay. I mean, I'd like to see them just on their, I'd like to see them drill a couple of holes, just drill me some holes. You got $9 million. And, but I can see why they'd say, okay, Mr. Teck, you do it. But that's sort of the only serious critique I have.
It's not turned over entirely. It's a 4-person technical committee, 2 from each side, with Teck having a casting vote.
Mhm.
So they will certainly have their input.
Yeah, and what he implied was that could change in the next, what did he say, 60 or 90 days, either because of another corporate partnership of some kind, or because of the warrants, raising some cash that would change he said his one worry, was that he'd just drill himself into bankruptcy, right? So he
Did I hear this or misinterpret? He seemed to say that they have something big under wraps that they're not talking about now.
Well, it sounds like he's got another corporate deal lined up, and another investor like Teck.
Yeah, and then there's
That was-
obviously, because of the purchases next door to him, it certainly implies that big companies are looking.
And that was the theme I picked up as well. I was thinking to myself, it wouldn't shock me at all knowing Ivanhoe Electric if they took a stake in them too. Ivanhoe is very aggressive, and this is exactly what they're looking for.
Lawrence, have you recommended this stock, or do you just do a lot of homework on it?
I did some homework leading up to this, and I've followed Mark for a long time and know him very well, and I think very highly of Mark.
Well, that's a good endorsement alone, Lawrence. Good to know.
Well, this
Okay.
is-
Any
this
last
is wonderful.
thoughts?
Nobody's found any skeletons, and everybody kind of likes the deal.
This is one I'd buy. I mean, I'm just saying, for me, I'd buy it. Even he said long term, because you never know what'll happen. But even he's implying there's some short term upside, which makes it, I mean, I'm interested in the long term story. Hearing Byron talk gets me excited about what might be there, but he implies there's short term upside.
I did a little research before yesterday as well, and I dipped my toe in a little bit yesterday.
Okay. Anyone else have an opinion on whether or not they'd buy it at this point, or is it something to watch? What do you think?
A little bit.
I have to say if you don't want to.
That's okay. It's a little bit too early I'm looking for more advanced stage exploration projects right now for me, but I don't have anything bad to say about it.
The snow line of Arizona.
It's a low market cap with no dead bodies that we can see. I mean, I think it's a good deal.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it. We have another one next Tuesday as well. So I look forward to seeing you guys there.
Okay, bye.